Now, hundreds of thousands of homes and businesses across Victoria are still without power as the state battles what's being referred to as one of the largest outage events in the state's history. It comes after the state was lashed by severe storms which damaged power lines and transmission towers and knocked out all 4 generators at Loy Yang Power Station. The state government is now warning that it could take weeks to fully restore the network. Joining me now is National Senator Matt Canavan. Matt, what does this say about our ability to cope without these power stations, which many people are desperate to shut down?
Well, Rita, I think what you can say is that the plans we've got are failing. The people running our electricity grid, all the governments in charge of electricity have all signed up to this net zero madness. They've all been telling us that we can shut down our reliable coal-fired power stations and replace them with mythical renewable energy, and their plans are failing and failing before our eyes. Now, they'll try and blame everybody else for their problems, but the facts are that they're the ones in charge. The buck has got to stop with these green zealots that have taken over our energy system, and hundreds of thousands of Victorians have paid the price overnight and still today because of this. This is going to cost small businesses hundreds of millions of dollars in lost custom today. They won't be compensated for that. It's an enormous amount of pain, and we're only just really getting started. Of course, we still have 18 coal-fired power stations across the country. They want to shut all of them. If this is what happens when one coal-fired power station goes out because of a transmission line going down, what's going to happen when we shut them all?
And we're getting reports also that renewables weren't working too well yesterday because it was too hot. The solar panels weren't working as planned. And when it's too windy, apparently that's an issue as well for wind power. I mean, how does that work? They don't work when it's cloudy, they don't work when there's no wind, and they work when there's too much.
Yeah, well, look, the wind turbines have had to put in new settings when it's too windy to shut down, because that's played a role. It contributed to the South Australian black event, you might remember, back in 2016 where the whole state went off. A big part of the reason the whole state went off was because the wind generators didn't operate properly and it caused the system to trip. And so that's changed in recent times, and that means that when it gets too windy, some wind turbines don't run. I just checked the figures right now today that that today only 5% of the wind turbines are working in Victoria right now, so 95% are not. Now, even with Loy Yang being out, even with that large coal-fired power station not being able to produce power because of the transmission line fault, brown coal-fired power stations are still working for 50% of them. So the brown coal sector in Victoria is working half the time, even with that large power station out, whereas the wind industry, the wind sector, is failing across 95% of them. So, I mean, we're going to hear a lot of the green zealots over the next few weeks blame coal-fired power for this result. But it's actually the renewable energy that once again has not been there, can't be relied on during a crisis. We've got to get back to building power stations that we can rely on. We haven't done that for more than a decade. We're seeing the consequences of that now. It's only going to get worse the longer we delay building a new coal-fired power station, building a high-efficiency, low-emission coal-fired power station in this country, so that we can get back to having not just reliable power, but affordable power too, for you to pay your bills and afford them, and to keep our manufacturing industry in Australia.
Now, you talked about not having new coal power plants being built, but are we even maintaining the existing ones properly? And one can understand why perhaps that maintenance isn't happening when they're all planning to close them. Why would you invest tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions, maintaining an asset that is set to close?
Well, exactly right, Rita. Just think about your own circumstances. If the government told you that, hey, look, that car you've got, we're going to ban it in a few years' time. You won't be able to use it. You won't be able to drive it in a few years' time. You're probably not going to change the oil that much. You're probably not going to get the big services done because why bother pay for that if the whole machine's going to be scrapped within a few years? And that's the situation facing coal-fired power station owners now, where the government's saying we're going to forcibly take your station off the market. Why would they spend sometimes hundreds of millions of dollars doing the overhauls that are usually needed? Now it seems like this lack of maintenance probably caused the Callide explosion a couple of years ago. We still don't have a report from the Queensland government, they're the owners or part owners of that power station. We still don't have a proper report on what happened at that power station. But I know the unions, speaking to the unions up there, they believe that there hasn't been the maintenance done on the coal-fired power stations in Queensland that contribute to this incident. And why is it that we've got Labor governments putting workers, putting union members at risk in massive power, they're massive machines, these turbines? If they're not maintained properly, we may get even the worst outcome where something explodes and people die. It's an absolute disgrace.
What role is gas going to play in our energy strategy? Is that a solution if we don't have nuclear power, if we're determined to self-harm and close down coal? Could gas be that backup? Because we are sitting on plenty of gas reserves. Some suggest hundreds of years worth of gas reserves.
Well, gas is great, and gas can provide reliable power. There's a key problem with gas. One key issue. When it's in the ground, it can't generate power. You've actually got to bring it up from under the surface for it to be any kind of solution. And of course, in Victoria, not only did Victoria ban fracking in their state, they've actually made it part of their constitution to not have fracking. So it's in the Victoria's constitution now, it's habeas corpus, equality before the law, and no fracking. that's the principle on which Victoria is being destroyed right now. They're losing businesses. We saw this week businesses are fleeing Victoria. It was the manufacturing heartland of our nation. It's just so sad to see it be destroyed before our eyes. And so we've got to develop our gas. But even then, I would say it's important about how expensive that gas is. So gas prices now in Australia are typically over $10 a gigajoule. The brown coal in the Latrobe Valley can be mined for 50 cents a gigajoule, a 20th of the price. And this is the detail that unfortunately gets missed a lot in our superficial discussion on energy, that people don't understand that just switching to different technologies can have enormous impacts on how much it costs for you to pay for your electricity. And of course, in the case of a state like Victoria, how much factories pay. And if the factories aren't competitive, if we can't get cheap energy prices, we will lose those manufacturing jobs. They'll go overseas and we'll just have to import more things from China.
And the sad thing is, in this state, there really isn't much of an option for voters, because we went to the last state election with the Liberal opposition having emission targets that were bolder than the Albanese government. They have completely signed up to this net zero madness. So, Matt Canavan, what is the solution for Victorians? I know you up in Queensland look down here and mock us sometimes, but I think most Victorians are sensible. We are just let down by our politicians.
Well, look, it's happening all around the country, and perhaps the most dispiriting thing about this is the lack of leadership from those that should be leaders. Our politicians have become spineless cowards in the last few years. They just follow polls. They do a poll on energy and let that decide what their policy should be. But it's about time we do demand some leadership from our elected representatives, and that we stop telling lies to the Australian people. I mean, I can tell you right now, most of the politicians that have signed up to this net zero madness know that it's a big fat lie. They know there's no way of delivering net zero emissions. They just want to protect, they think it's a way of protecting their jobs. They think, these politicians, these spineless politicians think that they need to parrot this net zero nonsense because it will help them stay in a job. Now, I don't think that's my job. I don't think it's the job of your elected representatives to put their jobs first. They should be putting their country first, their state first, and they should have the guts to actually tell the Australian people the truth. And we're not being told the truth right now. You should demand better. You should hold these politicians to account, because our whole political class is failing this country and it's being destroyed before our eyes.